All right, everybody settle in for some fun here. This is only about 40 more slides than Dale's, but I'll get through them as quickly as I can. As you can see, my title slide is not as fancy as Dale's was, but I do have a story. So there are three things that I really look forward to every 4 years. Number one, presidential election. That dictates, our transportation policy moving forward. Number two, the Summer Olympics. I geeked out so bad on the Summer Olympics this time, probably watched it more than ever. So that's a lot of fun there. Number three, last but not least, is our federal quadrennial review. Okay? Now, the reason I say this is, it gives us an opportunity to really showcase and discuss what we've been up to over the past 4 years since our last certification. So that's hopefully what I'll touch on here today. Provided an outline here. Some of the things I'm going to touch on. I won't get into any granular detail on these items, so don't be scared. So we'll do a little background. We're going to talk about the 2020 certification review, just a couple of points there. Public involvement, of course, and then we're going to get into some tip specific items, project selection and prioritization, and then, yes, annual obligations. And then I'm going to do a real quick little demonstration on our website update that we undertook as a group here this past fiscal year. All right, so this is giant, super big picture here, right? Regional project planning. As Dale so excellently presented, this first item here is the reasonably available funds in our 2045 LRTP. Is the planning side of it, and we get into programming. That's where me and my team, we get into the transportation improvement program. This is where the rubber hits the road, as I like to say, and this is where checks are getting cashed, stuff's getting built, right? And that's the last box there is things are being built or initiated for projects. So that's the overarching thing. What's in a tip? Okay, well, here's the textbook definition of what a TIP is, and it's surface transportation projects. It contains all federally funded and/or regionally significant projects that require an action by FHWA and also FTA. Before any of these projects can get built, they have to be in a TIP. Where do all these projects come from? Dale just told us. Anything that's not specifically listed in there is we're going to talk about some of those smaller projects, some of the active trans projects and some transit routes, things like that. You'll see those specifically listed in the tip. Okay, so we have funding, we have action by FTA, FHWA. Those go on our tip. And then the last picture here, I believe that's segment one of the peninsula widening on I-64. That's the result of this process, and projects get built. Our current tip, approved by our HRTPO board back in May of 23, spans fiscal year 24 through 27. You can't see this, neither can I, but this is something we're pretty proud of. VDOT loves us for this, but we get very, very into the weeds in what we show for each project. And every square you see in these tables, we show every note, everything that we've ever done to this project. We want that out front and visible for the public. And or referencing, if we have some changes to a project, we want to have this paper trail of everything that happens, right? We show the schedule in there. We show by PE right away, construction, all the allocations by year in the tip years, the 4 years. We show allocations for all those years, previous and current tip years. And we also show all the obligations by phase, by year, and we keep track of all this best we can, right? And there's a lot of information here. We don't have to include all this. We also include a TIP inset map, shows your project location. This is something that we pride ourselves on, keeping track of this and making this very transparent to the public, everything that's going on any of our TIP projects. Now, getting on to the 2020 certification review, we did receive a commendation, so we were really happy with that. And just a visualization of our TIP and making it easier for the public to take a look at. Now, we took what we did before, and we updated it again. We goosed just a little bit, and so we have a couple other things I'll show you later. Simplified some things and worked on that some more. One of the recommendations that we had last time was for the on the transit side of things. The recommendation was to include the cost summary table, which we actually did for the 21. As soon as we got that recommendation, as soon as we could get that to our HRTPO board to amend our TIP to include that table, we did. And it is included again in our current 24-27 TIP. Just wanted to make that very clear. The public involvement piece. Now, I'll get into this a little bit. There are a lot of public involvement pieces to the TIP. It's over a year process to get a TIP approved. It doesn't stop there. Our TIP is a living, dynamic document. It's always being changed. I think we have about 48 amendments coming up here in the next month or so. There's a lot, a lot of moving pieces here. But anyway, these are some of the ways that we inform the public on what's going on. So we have e-newsletter articles on the TIP itself and when that was being put together, many presentations, many meetings, the public notices for any amendment that we put out there. We have our standard 14 days for public notice for that, and for the full TIP, of course, we do 30 days. Our TIP website has a lot of opportunities for public interaction as well. TIP was posted to social media accounts. So yeah, we're kind of big on the social media. And you'll see a presentation, I think, tomorrow, kind of outlining some of the absolutely fantastic work that our communications team has done on that front there. We also do a project of the month. When member of our staff puts together a specific project, we kind of try to go different localities and agencies and stuff and give a real deep dive into any particular project. I think one recently is we did a bridge in Chesapeake that's been on the books for a long time, and finally this thing's getting going. It's a real congestion point in the region. You know where it is, Deep Creek, right? And then in the graphic to the right, I know it's too small to see, but just for illustrative purposes, this was a Facebook campaign that we did when we were getting ready to get during the development of the 24-27 TIP. And if you really look, you can see the initial comment here was, why are we planning today for projects that needed to be done 20 years ago, or something like that. I can't remember the exact wording. And I'm like, this is what I love about public involvement, right? This is probably the same thing that a lot of folks out there are thinking, right? So this particular post ended up with a string of 37 comments from a lot of different people. And what that did is it provided us an opportunity to inform and to let the public know, well, yeah, this project probably should have actually been on the books 30 years ago, okay? But we were missing something, money. All right, so with the advent of HRTF and HRTF funding, we can do stuff now. We've been doing stuff, big projects, the regional priority projects. We've been doing those for us. We provided a map, just in this one response here, of all the money and all the specific big, regional priority projects. A lot of that funding came from TAC, through HRTF and other sources. But just to show the public, we're doing a lot. We're doing a lot here. Here's where your money's going, right? So by the end of the string, this individual kind of backed off that a little bit. But it just illustrates really the importance of that public involvement piece and how we can tell our story, because a lot of people don't know. All right. Now we got this TIP, right? A lot of time, a lot of input. lot of information in there. It is 674 pages long. So hopefully you read that cover to cover, which I hope you did not. But most of that is really the TIP project sheets. But we do have a lot of background information and how we address different things in the TIP. But the TIP revision is, anything that we change from the inception of the TIP, which goes live October 1st of the new TIP year, and all of the changes that happen after that are going to be revisions to that TIP. So the two types of revisions: amendments. That's a big change to a project. We need to get the public involved on that. We put a public notice out on that, and the HRTPO board has to approve that. Administrative modifications, or as we love to call them, add mods. Right, VDOT? Yes, they know this terminology. And so what we started to do with add mods is previously we didn't bring those to our HRTPO board because they don't need approval. But at the same time, we thought, hey, why don't we at least have an attachment in our board agendas? Because this goes out there by, these things are happening. You're not required to approve this, but we want you to know about it also, and for the public as well to know about these things, because otherwise they would really never see the light of day unless they read the TIP document every single day and look for changes, right? So anyway, we started including it in the spirit of more transparency, which is number one for us. We really want to have an accurate, transparent, easy to access TIP, and it's not just the document, that's the process. TIP amendments. Here's what TIP amendments are, and we updated this just a bit recently to be more in line with other MPOs across the Commonwealth. Not only that, but also we did a survey of some other like-sized MPOs across the nation, and to try to kind of get some best practices. And we also followed the Virginia STIP guidelines, which was updated a couple of years ago. And so the addition or deletion of project, now I'm not going to go through all these here, but one of the changes here that we made was a major change in project phase initiation date. So we actually attached a time period to that, because a lot of times we get these projects just sit on the books, and the money's not getting spent. If there's a big change in schedule, we want to know about it. And then there's a sliding scale for a changing cost per project. You see those both listed here. They're the same, but I did have to separate the transit and FTA and the highway FHWA, the sliding scale, which was approved jointly with VDOT and with FHWA and FTA.
I do recall it. Do you know, did HRTPO sign off on, or do they have a different sliding scale?
Actually, they're the ones when we were doing our update, our amendments and administrative modifications. That was one of the comments they had was, hey, we have a scale too. And so we want to just show that they happen to be the same, but they just happen to be the same, and they're approved by both. And that was one of the pieces of input we had when we put this out for public comment. Okay, a little bit small writing there, sorry, but I didn't want to get it too big. It's kind of hard to fit this fun graphic on the slide. But these are the administrative modifications or add mods. These are all of the variables that go into an add mod. Once again, I'm not going to go and read all these, in any great level or detail. But adding or removing obligations is probably our most typical administrative modification that happens on the regular. And adding, transferring, swapping, deleting allocations to a project. We used to do all of those as amendments. That's one of the changes we had. We aren't required to do those as amendments, but we did it anyway. And so now that that's an add mod, that's one of the other reasons why we wanted to include that in that board agenda note to show that. Okay. TIP and STIP coordination. This is a very high level listing of TIP and STIP coordination. You see on the left-hand side here, culminating in a federal conformity finding that we received. But just going through the different steps now, I have a document that's high-level milestones that VDOT puts out, pages of different benchmarks throughout the process, and this is just for a new TIP This is just when we're getting into a new tip. The work doesn't stop there, and my goodness, it doesn't stop there, right? So after this, then, and I've noted here that the tip is developed in coordination with VDOT, DRPT, localities, agencies, and other stakeholders. And you see public comment opportunities available throughout this process. And as we revise the tip, always, was it omnipresent? But it's always there. The 24-27 tip, just wanted to kind of get a flavor for the types of the system projects we have here. There's a big one here, urban projects. We have 151 urban projects, secondarily 8. Enhancement. Now, that's something that we didn't include as much before. So for this particular tip, we've been putting more of a spotlight on active transportation projects. So there's been a big push, not just regionally, but locally, on completing segments of biking, hiking trails, multi-use paths, things like that. So we wanted to include all those projects in the tip, which makes a pretty big number total here of 290. But it's important, I think, that a lot of those kinds of projects are funded through the Transportation Alternatives, or TA set aside. And in the past, these projects were actually grouped. Most of them were grouped and not really listed specifically in the tip. The HRTPO board has allocation authority and selecting the projects. Now, and I'll get into the next slide here on that a little bit. VDOT Local Assistance Division actually scores the projects, but the HRTPO board chooses the projects and then also allocates funding to it. So that's just something we wanted to improve on this time. And any project that receives CMAQ, RSTP, TA set aside, and now CRP funding, we want to be able to track that, and we want to be able to show that in our tips. So that's something we did change for. It's more work, but you know what? It's worth it, in my opinion. Total project cost, you add up these 290 projects, $11.7 billion. That's no small amount, although HRBT is about $4 billion of that. But in the tip years, all those costs aren't in just the 4 tip years. That's it's total cost of the project and out years. But that's a lot of money. So it's a big tip. All right, so I said I would talk about this just a little bit. So as I mentioned, the HRTPO board, they select the projects and they award the funding under these 4 federal programs. CMAQ, that's annual. And earlier we were, during the CAC meeting, we were, I think we were talking about, does the CAC have an opportunity to weigh in on, I think Travis mentioned budget and anything getting built, any projects. Yes, they do. I just presented at the last CAC meeting on CMAQ and RSTP. One of the things that we do, and I don't know if everyone does this, but we have a form. It's a public project idea form, and this is posted on our website. And so for all CMAQ and RSTP projects, the public has an opportunity to submit their ideas, as much details they can. And then we take all those ideas that come in and we, dish those out to the different localities and agencies. In the past, some of these ideas have been put forward. Things got built. So I just wanted to refute that just a tiny bit from that, the CAC portion that, and this isn't the first time I've done it. I did it in our last time we were selecting projects too. I presented all that information. But anyhow, not just that, but so looking forward, the carbon reduction program, I want to do that for all of the pots of money that the HRTPO board has allocation authority over. So, and one of the things, moving forward too, is I like to get that out to the people even more and explaining that. And Dell has some great ways of doing that, and she's shown in her presentation for the LRTP. I want to steal some of those things and do more of the same. I want to get the word out there more than we already do. Getting back to this information here, so for the CMAQ and RSTP, that's annual. We do that every year. For CMAQ, the projects are ranked, we use an in-house tool. And Rob Case worked hard on this recently. We just updated this a couple years ago for the CMAC tool. Very quantitative process. It's all numbers, and we just, he just updated all the sources for that information. And we've been over 30 years, Rob. We've been using the CMAC tool. Great tool, works well. We take the projects.
That's a tool that the MPO
Yes.
developed. Is that okay?
We developed that, and then others have developed tools based on
Or I
that.
guess them up. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we do with the scoring and the ranking, using this quantitative process, we look at two things for CMAC. We look at the cost effectiveness of reducing NOx and volatile organic compounds in the atmosphere, those emissions. So those are the two things with the CMAC program, right? We weigh that through this tool against what the project costs, and so we'll have a ranking. This project has the best cost benefit for reducing NOx. This project has this ranking for the amount of pollutants, volatile organic compounds reduced. And then we just rank those, whichever one has it's a composite ranking. So this one was number 1 in reducing NOx. This one was number 2 in reducing VOC. That makes 3, if my math is right. That would probably rank near the top when we get our groups together to select the projects. So the lower number, the better. Anyway, that's how we select projects for CMAC. And we have a application form we post on our website. You've probably seen those. You've been perusing that. RSTP, much the same as Del mentioned. We went from a kind of a mix. It was very much qualitative application process. Although we had some, quantifiable numbers we could utilize as well. And the first year I started here, I was like, wow, I just, that was one of my first jobs of, scoring those, and it's like, well, this is just too much qualitative data here. And so working with Del over the years, and she still hates that she said yes to this, but the idea was let's do as many of these RSTP projects utilizing the prioritization tools we could. And then finally, the last round was 2022, I think, where we were able to score all RSTP projects utilizing the prioritization tool. And that just makes me all happy and fuzzy inside. But at the same time, it's a lot of work. It's a lot more work for us. But at the end of the day, I just think it's a better process and a better score, a better evaluation.
So we went from qualitative to quantitative.
Quantitative,
Was that more around like after 2018 with the performance-based planning? And
We actually, no, we started before that. It actually started this about when I started about 10 years ago. And so we started introducing things little by little, getting the weigh in from our subcommittees and the HRTPO board. And then we did it in like 3 phases, I believe. And so now we're to the point where we can score all of our RSTP projects that way. And I think it's a terrific way to go, not just for us, but maybe some other folks too.
I know some other regions have had challenges with that transition.
Yeah.
In project selection and going from like putting a number on,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, weighing projects with that number as opposed to how people feel, I guess, qualitatively the importance.
Yeah.
I think we had a lot of work done, not thinking that we're going to have a federal performance-based plan, but in general, I think a lot of the work that Keith and Rob and his team have done, we had the data, the supporting information to be able to get to a quantitative. So it wasn't as big a lift for us.
It took some time. It took some years to get to that point, and just really happy we did it. The next one is the new program through IIJA. This was the first year that we had a project selection process, and this wasn't just all in-house. We leaned on VDOT as well. There were a series of webinars and a lot of chances for input from the statewide perspective. And they came up with their statewide plan for carbon reduction, which was approved. And a lot of the pieces of that we were able to use, but we kind of did a little more of a hybrid approach with the carbon reduction program. And we decided to do this every 3 years, so it's a triennial process. And we do use, where applicable, the USDOT CMAQ emissions calculator toolkit. That doesn't score all types of projects for CRP that are eligible for funding. So that's something that we're hoping can change maybe at the federal level. But in the meantime, we kind of did a tiering system. So this was a little more of a qualitative part to the carbon reduction. But if the project could be scored through this toolkit, great, that's perfect, that's exactly what we want, right? If it's a project that couldn't be, then we went back to our CMAQ, because a lot of these projects were CMAQ type projects, and you use that to get a score and ranking. And then the third way to look at these was if there weren't any toolkits or this project, like for example, in a study, okay, to put in place carbon reduction program. Kind of hard to score that qualitatively, so we did that one a little more, qualitatively, and that would be a third tier. So when we put these all together, the folks in our committees were able to kind of look at the projects. Well, this one here is very clearly is going to reduce carbon emissions, right? Next level, it's going to reduce emissions, and maybe carbon's part of that. Thirdly, hey, we can see how this could contribute to decreasing carbon emissions in the future. So that's kind of how we approach that. And one of the things that came out of that process this time was we just had a transportation programming subcommittee meeting last month where we kind of like, okay, this is done for now, getting ready for the next process. How can we improve that? And so that's kind of what we're in the midst of doing right now. So it'll probably be changed up a little bit before the next time we get to that. But anyway, it was kind of fun. We had a working group that worked on that as well, and looking to improve that tool even more moving forward. And the last one here, the TA set aside program, that's a biennial, and as I mentioned, that's those projects are scored and ranked with VDOT's local assistance division, and then the HRTPO board comes in and they select the projects and also choose allocations along with our CTB district member. I know I spent a lot of time on this slide, sorry. All right, annual obligations. Now, proud to say that we have completed our annual obligations report prior to the end of the calendar year, every single year, at least I've been here. And so that's something that just part of our cyclical nature of what we do here. We take it seriously. We do the analysis on this, and we share that information with VDOT and any comments they may have. Once we post that report on our website. And just for those of you that don't know, an obligation, you say this and in meetings, and a lot of people are looking at me like, what's an obligation? What's an allocation? So I thought that sometimes it's good to actually define what that is. And I use allocation a lot, and there's like, okay, but some people out there don't know what that means, right? And so anyways, it's here for you, and it's pretty straightforward here. This is the table, that pretty much the results of our 2023 review. I don't want to get into the details of this too much. Just there's a note there for projects not in the 21-24 tip, the previous one. Those were all in financial closeout, and by agreement, we decided we don't include that in the analysis when we're doing our AOR report. But everything else, all the other numbers added up. One of the big things that changed probably 8-9 years ago was CMAQ and RSTP projects used to be grouped. And as same as with the active transportation projects I mentioned, we had those ungrouped and included in the TIP individually as projects. We didn't want those types of projects grouped. We want to see each of those individually. I mean, we allocate about $50 million a year on RSTP and about another $15 million on CMAQ. We want to see, and I'm sure everyone wants to see, where's that money going, right? So anyway, that's AOR review. Now, did a couple tweaks on our TIP website. Well, a couple tweaks meaning entirely new TPO website, we have a separate website that goes along with that, which is our HRTPO TIP website, PDC web. I mean, it was website extravaganza around here for a number of months. But I just wanted to show you a couple of quick things, and I wanted to make the TIP easier to access. So during our last certification, I kind of went through, hey, here's a project search tool we have. Got some feedback. It's like, it was too powerful. It had too many options. It was confusing. We simplified the heck out of it. I'll show you that in just a second. We also incorporated, and thanks to Joe Turner, who I don't think is here right now, but put together a TIP, that 674-page document, a flip book, which is searchable, and I'll do that just in a second as well. And then we updated our already existing TIP interactive map. So hopefully this will all work out here if I can get some assistance from my friend here. No, I'll just need to. All right, have it. I'm sweating, and I'll need a keyboard probably too. Same type of stuff. It's not showing up there. It's showing up on the screen here, so if you want to come up. No, it'll come up. Oh, cool. We'll get that going. So I'll kind of talk about this just a little bit. He can probably actually just go to our website and just pull it up that way too. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, sir. All right. So it's hard to see from over here. It really is. So new to the tip. This is one of the things that we didn't have in the past. I mean, recently in our last, the website we just updated, we did have it. In the past, we didn't have that. So it's kind of a landing page for someone who has no idea what a tip is, and they need to find out. So you would just go to this, new to the tip page. There's a welcome and describes a lot of things. But what I wanted to show you on here was, first of all, so you want to find a project, all right? And you live in Chesapeake, all right? Well, you want to go to, you can look by project number, which I think we have like 290 of these, okay? So if you happen to know what a UPC is, most people don't, and that was one of the things that we found out pretty quickly. But we also have interactive project map. So what you do is, well, let me make this a little bigger. So you live, say, I don't know, if I can see. Yeah, I'm in the Outer Banks right now. Yeah. So for example, there's a project right out here, right? And we have points and lines, obviously. So this project here, this is the main street at Route 10 bypass in Isle of Wight County. All right. So we have some basic information in the pop-up here. And then if you want more information, well, first of all, we can zoom to it. All right. So you can kind of get an idea where it is. And then we can also click on this tip sheet here. And this is going to pull up that whole project sheet and all the information you'd ever want to know about this Main Street US Route 258 at Route 10 bypass project. And the same things I described earlier, it's just a little bit easier here to see. Any notes if there are any, allocations, schedules. So this is all in here and ready to go.
That's updated when the project.
Every time.
Wow.
Yeah, every time. So what we do is we take the HTML and then just upload it as we change it in the GIS. So, but we can also, let me see here. This is the tip report document, okay? So this is what I was talking about a little earlier. Don't worry, I'll be done here in just a second. So this is just a flip book here that shows just a little better way, maybe if you are trying to get information about a project. You might know, that it is, say, just any information you want to know about. It takes you, like, here's how to read a tip page, right? takes you right to that page. And so this is all dynamic, and you can click on any of these pieces here to go right to that page since it's such a huge document. And there's also a search feature. I can't see it. Where's the little hourglass or the, what's it called? Anyway, there's a, I can't see, I just can't see it. Is it done? Sorry. Oh, okay, thank you. Search there, okay, that's what I was looking for. All right, so and for example, you can type in Norfolk, all right? And if you type in Norfolk there, it'll show you every instance of any project relating to Norfolk in the entire TIP document. You can scroll through that, and you can get more specific too, and to do that. But anyway, I just thought that this was an easier way to actually interact with the document itself. Anyway, that's about it. So you can switch back out of there, and
Just to John's point, the great thing about this is all of the by the way, I'm Matt Clubhouse on the computer. I'm sorry. The great thing about the HTML flipbook is that it provides all of the data on the back end. So if we understand that certain terms are being searched more frequently, or if certain projects are kind of coming to light, they've actually utilized that to figure out which project to highlight and bring a little bit of additional light to. So there's a lot of metrics on the back end that are pretty neat. So, and I apologize again for jumping in on that.
Thanks, Matt. He has lots of cool stats on all this stuff. I can't wait to their presentation tomorrow. So anyway, that's all I have on the tip for now. Once again, it's more of a high-level approach. I kind of got into that project selection a little bit more in detail. But anyway, I thought it was good information to throw out there.
Great, thank you. Yeah, the project sheets, they are helpful, and I see what you're saying. Allocations versus obligations, which is a good transition to the annual listing of obligated projects.
Yep.
As often what we see with the reports, at least on the transit side, is transit funding as it relates to drawdowns in trams. So when the transit agency actually requests
Pull some money.
funding for refunds of projects. And that's why, looking through the document, I know the HRTPO they identify the federal requirements that should be in the annual obligation report. But at least on the transit side, and that's what I focus on, I don't see all those requirements in there. Like the total project cost, the amount of funds remaining on the tip related to that project. And then the amount of funds that were obligated in the years prior. And that's at least what I see for, it's in the report, at least for 2023. And I'm curious how that process of developing the annual report is, what that process is, at least as it relates to transit. I noticed for the 2023 annual obligation report that for Hampton Roads, all the transit agencies were included in Virginia in the report, and I'm not sure if that was intentional or not. It could be to my understanding that this is a report
It wasn't parsed out.
Wasn't parsed out.
No.
Yeah, which the annual listing should include the funding, the funds that were obligated for at least the region. So having the funding that was obligated for that was outside of HRTPO, I don't see the connection in why that was.
100%.
Yeah, so I wanted to follow up with that, as right now the data that's listed for transit doesn't seem to include all the federal requirements as it relates to what should be included. And then I saw too that there is, and hopefully this would be items for improvement, but
that's not the
section-
appendices though either.
this is
That's
just
just
the report itself.
Yeah, but we have appendices that go with that too.
At least I'm looking at page 17. That's when the HRTPO, when those projects are listed. But on page, I guess, triple I in the document, it notes summary of issues reported. So looking towards the future, it seems like there were issues related to the data, and is this something that occurs every year? Is this something that, at least between the MPO, DRPT, VDOT, there's room to improve so that there aren't these issues? I'm kind of interested where these, what's the overall, is there some kind of goal to resolve these issues?
We're reporting the instances of where things don't line up.
And I guess,
Right.
let's say this is an annual report, are there then updates? Like, oh, we found these issues, so what happens? Are they addressed, or I guess the
We
process
send
just
this
goes?
report to VDOT.
Okay, and do they
Okay.
respond to address these issues?
I'll leave that up to them to say.
Okay,
When we do get the reports back internally, what we do within planning and also with our programming section is that we go through and make sure we address those areas where we're finding inconsistencies between the documents. So whether it's anything in regards to funding, anything in regards to obligations, or maybe a project not being listed that should have been listed, we work internally to be able to do that.
okay. And what happens then once those issues are identified and corrected?
What happens is either it goes to our central office partners, maybe when we update something within our system, it may go to our central office partners so they can create new obligations, or we speak with the project managers in other sections on our lab office so that they can update those.
Okay, because it does look like an opportunity once those issues are identified and corrected to then go back to the annual obligation report and then we're revised. It's like, okay, these were identified and now it's resolved. And I don't know if anyone from.
That's a requirement? I mean, I understand it would be good to do that, but
Requirement.
Yeah.
So,
no, for the resolution of the inconsistencies.
I mean, okay.
I mean, the federal requirement is for the document to include all the obligations, and if there's something that,
Is it a requirement for the
being-
document to be accurate or?
No.
No, I think what John's asking is,
Resolution of
does the
identified
document need to have,
inconsistencies.
like, we do a summary of these are the issues we've
Right.
identified in
Yeah.
our review, we send it to VDOT, and they work through, but we don't, what my question is, do we need to have a resolution now in the document? Because this needs to get
That's what we
updated
got.
by the end of the year, and, you know, by December 31st, it needs to be on our website, so typically, you're not going to have a resolution by the time we get the data, we
It's
review
not going to
this,
be resolved in that.
it's not going to be
timeframe.
resolved.
I don't believe so, but just in terms of, and that's something where, yes, the document must be published on the website, but that doesn't say, the document then can then be revised and updated for accuracies later.
And I think that's part of what John's getting at. While this may not, we don't put out an official, here is an update to the AOR report, these are the issues. Our constant engagement with VDOT and DRPT is resolving in case it's an amendment, it's an add-on. Those ongoing things are things that we do to make sure that our dollars match, VDOT's dollars matches DRPT's dollars. So yeah, we don't officially put out another report saying, here we have resolved these issues, but that's part of the ongoing tip maintenance section that John and his team keep. They work in very close coordination with our district and central office and DRPT.
But I see your point. I understand exactly what you're saying. It wouldn't be a bad idea to, I don't know if we would amend what we have on the, I guess we could do that. We can update it, put a revision date on it, X, Y, and Z, just as a matter of, you know, kind of cleaning things up a bit, right? So that's certainly something we could do. I just,
Or that could also be something talked about in the roles and responsibilities of the agreements, what happens later with this. As each agency is right, there's a duty to provide this information, and I did see reports from DRPT, but not as much related to the transit agencies. And the transit agencies, at least the urbanized ones, they should have a better understanding. They themselves apply for their FTA funds directly, so they would have a better idea, unless if DRPT wants to put that report together. But that's something that Hampton Roads, WADA, Suffolk, they could provide directly. Because one of these is, is related to a transit project, in where one of them mentions there's several public transportation projects in the TIP that should be listed in the annual obligation listing report. And at least for that, if it's in the, it doesn't say where the issue stems from in terms of why it's not in the report, just that it's not.
I think
Because we're comparing these things against our TIP. We get
I know
this
the TIP
information
isn't always
in.
being updated, so if it's not right in the,
the TIP is constantly updated.
Yeah.
The TIP is constantly updated. And this is more like a snapshot at the end of the year. This is what we're finding. But our work doesn't stop just the minute we put out this report. So
Yeah.
that's kind of why this is more like a snapshot in time of December that year. These are some of the issues we've identified, and we continue to work with our partners to keep resolving a lot of this.
okay.
That's the maintenance part of the TIP.
At least in the top, it says it should have been in, some of these projects for public transportation should have been in the annual obligation report, but they weren't.
And that was
So
a
that's-
situation where we have X listed in the TIP,
Yeah.
okay? And we got something from DRPT that didn't show that in the obligations. And yes, that's exactly where you'd want to get together, which is what we do.
Okay.
But we don't, effectively, but we don't
Then,
do it there.
okay. I guess
Does that
if
make
it
sense?
just stands as a separate document, then as a reader or member of the public, it seems like there's some issues and that they're not going to be resolved. And I guess it wouldn't say, then please look at the TIP for the up-to-date
We
obligation.
can do that. That's a very good suggestion.
Okay.
That's something we can add.
I'm very flexible and I'm willing to do whatever it takes.
That,
All right?
yeah, that, I think.
But yeah, seeing these as separate documents, and if I'm coming across this for the first time, like, oh, there's some issues, what happens next?
Sure.
So John, that's sort of a stagnant snapshot in time, right?
And some of those issues may be in process of being resolved. There's always a lag time of at least a few months before these things will show up. We don't have a board meeting every single month. And so there could be something on the books and we've received a request to change something. It's just the time. We don't have a meeting in December. So it'd be tough to kind of do all that.
Yeah, that turnaround.
Right, because when we get the information, we don't have much time to even put that report together.
John, I
Once we
think
do it, yeah.
what we can do
That's
is
true,
our
yeah.
AOR, December of this year, or even on the website, where the AOR is, to say this is a snapshot as of this date.
Yeah.
For more current information on these projects, please refer to the TIP, and we
Mm-hmm.
can link to the TIP. And I think
Okay.
that's a good way of getting at, and we can do that. That's a.
But then the follow-up after that, I think that's a great idea.
I know a lot of work is done into the TIP and seeing, look at all we do to go above and beyond to update the TIP and make sure the applications and.
They're not
Right,
gonna
if it's
match
stated
all
as
the time.
Yes, a recommendation, not a requirement, then, okay, maybe a couple months later, go back to the annual obligations report and.
See where that stands. Yeah, it's a great
It
idea.
could even be
Yeah.
revisions, issues identified, and then, a page later saying, were they resolved, even just like a check like
That's a
that.
great idea.
And this kind of goes back to the UPWP that we didn't have time to discuss, but looking at the transit projects and maybe continuity of projects that were on the past TIP, on the current TIP, and maybe what that looks like as a narrative. There were several planning feasibility studies for Hampton Roads Transit. There's the Naval Station, Norfolk Extension, there's the Peninsula, Chesapeake, Bay. those extensions and the narrative. I guess maybe the highway projects, there's more on that, but some of these studies have crossed through TIPs, have crossed through UPWPs. And that was one item that I looked at for these planning studies where HRT had, for their UPWP, about 16 million in planning per year. And wow, this, if we look at the UPWP as something where this is the amount of money that is projected to be used in the region during this fiscal year, that's, in the end, gets to about $112 million of planning for these feasibility studies, the naval station getting around 64 million. And then when I compared the amount of funding that's programmed in the UPWP to the TIP, where it's, okay, this is well see the true amount of obligation, that's where learning for the naval extension, that the scheduled obligations that were previously, I guess the funds previously obligated, that would go up to about 26, 27 million and not the 64 million that was referenced in fiscal year, let's say 2018 through 2025 UPWP. So that's something we're checking.
I'm a little confused here. So if you're looking at the UPWP,
That's the amount of funding to be programmed to be used in the upcoming fiscal year.
in the UPWP, we're really just looking at staff hours to work on those studies.
John, I think.
At least for Hampton
I'm on
Roads, this is something we'll talk about later,
Yeah.
but kind of connecting funds that were obligated and how that might relate to the funds that were programmed in the UPWP. And that might only apply to more larger studies, maybe to studies that are not being conducted by the MPO, but that are being led by the transit agencies. And that's also related to making sure that fiscal constraint is being met. Because seeing in the budgets for the UPWP where, okay, HRT really does have 15 million in planning studies each year from 2018
Okay, so
to
you're saying-
2025. And then I look on the TIP and see, oh, okay, did the math, 64 million for the naval station extension, only 25 million was obligated for that. So having those fundings come back, is something where at least the TIP has the information that's correct, but the UPWP seems lagging for the funds that are programmed, and even mentioning rollover funds. Like, are these projects happening? Trying to connect better the work that is being done or scheduled to be done this year versus what was obligated. And I think that's an opportunity for the TIP to, maybe not the TIP, but at least the UPWP to reference, hey, these were the funds that were planned to have been used in past years, and then this was the schedule that it actually followed.
So that was a lot. And I just want to be clear on what you're saying about the UPWP versus the TIP. Okay, so in the UPWP, and are you talking about in the write-up, say, for example, under HRT,
Yeah,
they're talking about spending X on this study, right?
yeah.
Okay. And yet, that's their plan, but in the TIP, that's not shown up that way yet. Is that fair? I'm just trying to clarify.
And maybe that's related to allocated funds. I mean, it's good that there's a cost and expenditures. And so I guess looking through the UPWPs, and that's mainly, okay, yep, that should have been discussed in that section, but using the TIP as a means to compare the funding that was initially programmed as, and that would only relate to more of the planning projects, and then seeing how that's.
I would look at the UPWP more of, this is kind of our work program, like the overall program.
Yeah.
I would say TIP is literally where the money, here is the money to actually implement the project. again, UPWP do it once a year, we do amendments and stuff, but it's more of, again, similar to the AOR. It's just a snapshot in time in some way. Yes, we make sure we update the UPWP. But what I'm saying is the UPWP is more of the overall umbrella of this is what VDOT's planning to do, this is what HRT is planning to do because of our pass-through funds that we send to those agencies. But the actual, here is the money going to this project versus this project, that's the tip. That and the tip, and I understand the rollovers, we've had conversations. That's to make sure, again, part of the tip maintenance, making sure projects that the amendments that didn't get through in the current 24 to 27 tip, we keep updating them. So I think the UPWP, again, the problem is we are not able to update the UPWP every month because every time we.
Sure.
So that's kind of why our tip is kind of the place where we go here, this month. So that's why we try to be very, very transparent in terms of amendments and add mods and having all of the information. So the UPWP, again, is a snapshot in time. And this is kind of what HRT, when we have passed through funds, that's kind of our engagement. But VDOT has a section saying this is all what things that we plan to do. So some of those studies, as Ray mentioned, they had to pause because Norfolk was making a decision. So to update the UPWP, not just for that, to update the UPWP to reflect that is going to be not the most intuitive. So that's why we do it as part of the tip.
At least not updating the UPWP, but from year to year. So let's say, okay, some of these planning studies we first saw them in 2017 or 2018. And each year, more funds are being added in the UPWP, as that's how it read that the budget, okay, a $7 million CMAQ towards this project, that's $7 million each year. And so referencing the tips or how much funding was obligated is that the funding that it's put on the UPWP, is that new funding or is that just funds that are carried over from the past year?
And I'll get you an answer to that. I think it's the best estimate of funding at that time. It's not, I cannot specifically give you an answer saying it's a carryover. It's the best estimate. Every time we come up with the UPWP, we have updated budget information, which is kind of why we don't put it out until we know the numbers. But yeah, so it's one of the best estimates we have at that time, but I see.
We allow the NGO to do program funding at the end of the year. So if they know they want to use this funding for planning purposes the next year, we allow them to do that. We do program funding for them. But if they don't do program funding and they have money left over, the money stays with the NPO, but they can't use it the following year. Because the records is available the next year. So they would have a set of money we know that they're going to get for the initial estimate. And then if they want to deprogram, they can deprogram from their existing year to the next year. Otherwise, whatever's left over at the end of the year, it's moved over to the following. So it's or to give them a number to start with.
That does make sense. At least I'll circle back later to this topic, but in terms of
I want to look at
a
exactly.
question of like,
so I can
where
answer
the
better.
funds used, is this the estimated total project costs? Looking at the UPWP is more, this is the amount of funds that will be used this year for this project. And it's like, oh, if this project's still on hold, but it's showing the project, just showing the project cost and not the amount of funds that are being used this year, then it becomes duplicative in terms of what's the total project cost, what's the new schedule, making note of, okay, timeline delays, project delays, things of the like.
We are at the mercy of requests to revise the tip, right? If we do not have a request by either the locality, the agency, VDOT, UIPT, there's not a change yet. And that's something that we have been working on a lot lately as far as tip-step coordination, not only with VDOT over the past year. We've had many, many meetings. We actually have come up with, and we've included our localities just last month, our TPS meeting, as far as this tip-step coordination. And as you know, we have the same process going on with DRPT right now. And the item that you just brought up, that's a part of it. I think that's a big part of it in getting to that point down the road to make this a lot more efficient. And so, like I said earlier, my goal and our charge is to have the most accurate and up-to-date tip as we can. It's a continuous process. And so where that funding listed in UPWP versus tip, yeah, there's a strong possibility that, by, a few months in, we're not going to be matching that up, okay? Things change constantly, obviously. But once again, we are at the mercy of requests to update. And we would have to have a whole nother day to talk about rollovers. I won't do that to you, or I haven't heard anyone else here today. But that's part of that tip coordination update.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, I was a little confused with what you're asking there initially, but I think I understand what you're saying now. So, and we can provide some additional documentation on even that specific project or anything else of that nature, kind of
More
how
like
that
the
works.
UPWP then becomes not part of the tip, but okay, eventually those could be obligated funds, and then, yes, that would be represented in the updated tip
Correct.
version, and making sure that UPWP is accurate.
The first day it's out, it's accurate. As we move forward, without amendments and such, it would be less accurate, yes.
Or at least making reference to the projects when the next year's UPWP comes forward. Like if it was making that reference so it doesn't seem duplicative of, did this project, when did it start, when did it end? We've seen the same project on the UPWP for over 10 years, so what's going on?
And that's something we can communicate, because this is the information we received. Like Jeff here will reach out to HRTPO and Suffolk and say, and that's information we received from them, and maybe that's a good idea to kind of let them know the next round of.
This has been hanging out for a while.
Total allocation to the project, what they anticipate
And
spending in
that's
the
something
fiscal
I've seen,
year.
I'm like, whoa, this project's
Is what we
for,
can hone in towards.
yeah. Because ultimately, it's the MPO's document. Ultimately, the MPO is required to make sure it's fiscally constrained. So yes, on my side, I know of Transit is the expert in transit projects, and they determine the projects to be programmed on the tip if it is UPWP. But then what does HRTPO do to make sure, to do a checkpoint and not just, okay, great, we incorporated it, but do a review like, okay, yeah, we've seen this for the past 10 years. Where has this gone? What is the status update? What is the updated schedule? And that's okay if things get backlogged, but it's just making a note, because I'm reading a narrative that's the same year after year after year. I was like, okay, when did this start? You would think, are these separate projects? No, they're not. So I think it's more of documentation and updating more than, that's probably ultimately like to address, I guess, the situation of seeing the same project on the UPWP year after year with additional funding for it. Reading that the UPWP is the total amount of money that the agency or any of the planning efforts that would be done in the region, how much funding will be used that year, unless otherwise stated. Unless stated, oh, these are rollover funds, oh, this project is going to take 5 years. Unless if there's that distinguish, then it seems like the project it starts the date the fiscal year begins and then ends when that fiscal year ends.
Sure.
Okay.
Hello, go ahead, John.
No, so we're specifically discussing the UPWP from year to year and tracking projects that keep appearing,
Yeah, and that's what,
which is a separate entity, really. Of course, the
tip
tip
shows how
is,
much funding was obligated. And so
Right.
if your UPWP says $7 million is going to go towards this, I should see that in the obligated. And so that's how I double checked, where it's like, oh, there's not $64 million in this project. There's not 20 million in the other one. So it's just connecting, right, that immediate 1 year efforts to then, yes, how that relates to other documents.
I see where you're coming from, yes.
So I think that 7 million is not the obligation for FY24 or FY25, as it's reflected in the UPWP. It is the total cost of the project. The project cost or the studies in this case. It's not, UPWP does not reflect the obligations on projects. It's the total cost, correct?
But again, as she correctly notes, many of these large transit studies extend over multiple years. And so we could hone in better as to, of that 7 million in FY '25 or '26, what percentages of that expect to be spent. So there is a confusion that this is rolling. It's the same money being counted from year to year.
It doesn't look like that.
It doesn't look like that. So we can add clarity
Doesn't
to
read
it.
that.
Right now, it doesn't, and it's mentioned
Yeah.
other work elements to be performed during this, so then it's like, okay, this work is being done every year at a cost of this amount, but it could be referenced. I mean, it could even look, not saying that every project needs that, but schedule, okay, the TIP has a schedule, the UPWP, and most do in terms of like ongoing quarterly as needed, but, this was mainly seen with the Hampton Roads Transit, the larger feasibility studies, which then gets into oversight on, okay, how does the MPO make sure that any sort of outside project that the MPO won't be performing, that checking in to see what those projects are, if that was included elsewhere, if it's a continuum, what is that schedule, what is the total cost of that, and seeing that progress.
I think we do that very actively through the TIP, but
Through
we
the
see, the TIP's kind of where we really work with HRT, WATA, Suffolk, and all our partners, because that's kind of where you see the actual money, the allocations and obligations. UPWP is more HRT, WATA, and you're right, it's the MPO's document, and we can make sure we kind of clarify it further for the next round. But yeah, but TIP is kind of where we really get into the dollars. I've seen TIP amendments and add mods for $2 moving from this account to that account. We get into that level of $1 too, I've seen that. So yeah, that's kind of where we really get into the specificity.
Yeah, which makes sense, just,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think, I'll just add on, I think, from a just QAQC standpoint, I'm looking at Appendix F of the 2025 UPWP. It says public comments on the FY 2023 UPWP. And I go, did you get any comments on the FY 2025? So little things like that could use, just double check the document. We looked at, for example, we mentioned TA set aside project selection process guide. That's 2016. Looking at, I clicked on the link, it took me to a 2016 document, which was last updated, 2016, 2018. But it's in the 2023, 24, 2025 UPWP. It says maintain and update HRTPO set aside project selection guide as a new work element. And it's in there continuously every year in the UPWP. And when you click on the link to the project selection guide, it takes you to a document. It's 2018, last updated. So do you recall updating the TA
Yes,
recently?
yes. Let me take a
That's
look.
interesting. Okay, yeah. Take a look
Might
at
just
that.
have the wrong document, Mr. Mayor.
So I'm looking at it because, and it says, like I said, it's in every UPWP update TA. If I click on the link, it takes me to Transportation TA set aside, a guide to HRTPO Transportation set aside project selection process. When I click on that, it takes me to a project selection process, which says prepared by the HRTPO in November 2014, updated August 2016.
We definitely updated it. We check
Yeah.
and make sure the right thing is.
It's the wrong.
So yeah, so just, in addition to that, there's some other tasks in there that we reviewed, and we're like, well, it's a quality control over, the review.